Good. Well, tonight we're actually going to concentrate on Kundalini, what it is, and we don't have time to do a full controlled Kundalini rise. That takes at least a whole day and usually quite a lot of preparation before it. But towards the end of my talking about it, I want to do some doing about it and do an exercise which will help you if you are working with Kundalini. That's why you've all got a crystal, and I'll tell you what we're going to do with that later on. But I wanted to ask you some questions. This is what came out when I was writing Crystal Prescriptions. I asked a lot of people what they thought Kundalini was, what their experience of Kundalini was, and I formulated these questions, and then there's some quotes to share with you. So these all came from things that people had said to me. So, have you experienced a firestorm rushing up your spine? Have you had electric shocks or tingles coursing all through your body? Have you had waves of energy flowing like ripples in the sand, just going, when water's been on ripples? And have you had icy chills going up and down your spine? Have you had an instantaneous cosmic orgasm? That's the one we're all going for, I think, at the end of the day. A scintillation of the senses was one description, and ultimate bliss, and momentary enlightenment, being bathed in liquid light, and being blasted out of your body. Now, that's the one that we're going to have a look at in a minute, the being blasted out of your body, because Kundalini can have some amazing beneficial effects, but it can equally, if it doesn't work quite right, if it goes off in the wrong direction, as it were, it can have some very strange side effects, and we're going to look at those in a minute. But this is the description of Kundalini that I wanted to start the book with, I wanted to start talks with, I start workshops with, because I just thought this was such a good explanation. And it was Dr. Glenn Morris who said, Kundalini is the moist explosion of dark, raw, sexual, sticky, juicy power. It is distinctly the wild feminine which cannot be controlled. It is primitive, messy, and overpowering, like birth, and can be as frightening as death. And that kind of encapsulates, I think. I've got a lot of other people trying to put it into less raw language, but I think that description really encapsulates it. It is a Sanskrit word that means circular power, and basically the idea goes way, way back, and it lies coiled at the base of your spine around the sacred bone, your sacrum, and it rises up like two serpents, and most of the ancient pictures have these wonderful coiled serpents coming out at the top of the head. And there's some, if you have a look online, there's some absolutely fabulous pictures of the old picture of the Kundalini. But as I said, when I started researching for the book, it was because so many people were coming to workshops or getting readings from me with this whole set of symptoms that were being activated not by one particular thing. So people were doing Kundalini yoga, and there's a clue in the name that yes, it might be a Kundalini rise. But equally, one woman had a Kundalini experience when she was giving birth. Somebody else from meditation, somebody else from Tai Chi, all kinds of completely sort of apparently random exercises, spiritual exercises, were bringing up the Kundalini. And some of the signs that it was stirring were very similar, and being me, I was going, there's got to be an underlying thread. There's got to be something that's holding all these things together. It's not just coincidence that people are reporting this. So some of the signs were very subtle and some were very physical. We have something that was reported by many, many people, the feeling that something transformatory was going on, but they weren't sure what it was. So they weren't getting that physical sense of an energy stirring, but they were getting a sense sort of up here in their head, you know, I'm missing something, something's changing and I don't quite know what it is. And that was often accompanied by this very deep dissatisfaction, and someone described it as a yearning for inner development. They'd come to the workshop because they had to. You know, I was doing a opening higher consciousness workshop, and something had propelled them. And that something actually was, their Kundalini was stirring. But until we got towards the end of the workshop, that didn't click for her at all. I think when it did, it was when Kundalini started moving. So very much mentioned were altered states of consciousness, all the different altered states of consciousness. And, you know, when I started looking at all this, first of all, it was in the 1970s. And everything I was researching because I was having experiences. And they were weird, strange, paranormal. Now they're called exceptional human experiences. The world of science and is catching up, you know. So out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, all of these things were all part of the Kundalini experience, but it wasn't being labelled with that. Some of the more physical sensations were electricity going through your body, internal lightning bolts. And I actually, when I wrote the book, put it as light-ing. So light was coming in, but the copy editor said lightning doesn't have an E in the middle, and went like that through the E. And I thought, but that's exactly what's happening. We couldn't put that. We couldn't print it like that, but it would have been brilliant to do it because it really got an image gets a message across so much more. But these sensations can be so jerking, they're almost like epileptic seizures, real like that. And we've had a few of those in the workshops, which thankfully the crystals then calm down and channel through the right pathway instead of the wrong pathway. So your head can feel like it's absolutely going to burst, your skin can feel like you've got insects crawling up and down it. You can have this heightened sensitivity, so the slightest noise it hurts, or light is too much for you. You can hear music. That was another one that was very common, surprisingly common. Internal music, the music of the spheres, it was described a long time ago, but we've sort of lost that sense of there being this rhythm, this sound that was music of the spheres. So all of those things and a whole lot of psychological catharsis things were going on. And the one that I really find people coming to workshops with is the pounding headache, the migraine. And it's almost as though the Kundalini gets stuck and your head gets absolutely stuffed. Crystals are brilliant for that. And something like anandalite, you're nodding, and you know, this is basically frozen divine light. And if you put that and you just sort of sit there for a minute, apart from the fact you float off beautifully, you can feel all your energies coming back into balance. And this is a crystal that I use a great deal for Kundalini, especially up here over the head. But we'll look at the crystals in a minute. The not beneficial signals and signs were things like insomnia, acute infections, sometimes really psychotic episodes, sometimes just depressions. All kinds of physiological things were coming along, to the point where people were arriving sometimes at workshops going, something's happening and I don't know how I got here. And, we'd settle them down. And the way that we would work in a workshop is to ground people, which is what we're going to do in a minute, and then clear the chakras, and then create this path for the energies to move through, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And people would walk out kind of, yeah, I know who I am, I know where I am. And the difference, just to see somebody walk in going, I don't quite know who I am, and see them walking out going, yes, I do know, and I can feel the benefits of the Kundalini moving. And one of the very strong benefits was actually being much more fully physically and mentally and spiritually and emotionally present in your life, in your body, and in what was going on, and loving yourself. And, we could spend a whole evening talking about the benefits of loving yourself as against what we very much, I don't know what it was like in America, but in England we were taught, oh no, it's selfish to love yourself and selfish to put yourself first and look after yourself when you have to look after other people. Kundalini says, your body's beautiful, your body's wonderful, you're wonderful, you deserve to be loved. Love yourself. Great stuff. And you do then handle life with much more ease, much more grace. Increased physical, emotional, mental and spiritual well-being. That was so often reported. And much more aware, but in a good way, of sensations and feelings. And we talk a lot about mindfulness these days. And for me, mindfulness isn't about having an empty mind. It's about being in the moment and fully aware of it. And Kundalini, when that's moving, really helps that process to express itself. A lot more cellular energy. It's like when the Kundalini moves, it doesn't just come up the spine. And when you're circulating it, instead of shooting it out in all sorts of funny directions, when you start to circulate it, it goes between your cells, so it's a very physical process as well as being a sort of psycho-spiritual process. You get this sense of very much better flow through all the electrical systems of your body. The hormone systems reset themselves. It is as though your immune system has been down on the not quite calibrated, and it suddenly clicks, and your whole sort of physical self is actually fully incarnated and therefore able to function. And much greater alertness. That was another thing. People said they no longer sort of floated off and kind of went like this and went blank. They were very present in that moment. And there was a very strong sense of having put down their burdens and their baggage. And personally, I think, if that's the only experience that you have from a Kundalini rise, it's a very good one. To be lightened, to literally be lightened. But some people said they had very strong enlightenment moments. There's quite a few of these, but we'll just find another couple. Inner peace, I think, was a very big thing. And it increased empathy and compassion for other people. So it wasn't just that you benefited, the way that you viewed other people was beneficial as well. So let's have a look at some of the crystals that help this process, and then we'll do an exercise. This is a red serpentine that I picked up on the Lizard down in Cornwall. Very magical place, those of you who know it. And serpentine has been used as far back as I could research, and I went right back when I was doing my MA in cultural astronomy and astrology and was looking at birthstones. I found all this information about what these stones have been used for by shamans and healers and priests, and everybody way back was using serpentine to journey, to help the Kundalini rise. Sometimes it was called Kundalini rice, sometimes it was called other things. But this is one of the really old shamanic Kundalini stones. It's such a good, in the name, you know, serpentine, it's got that sense. So that's a very good one. This is jasper, and what I've given you tonight is a slightly less potent form of jasper. This one that is poppy jasper, they're all forms of poppy jasper, but the lighter ones have a matrix as well, and you'll see why we've got that in a minute. But this, the red one on your base chakra, you know, you can feel that sense of something stirring, something's moving. But what you don't want is for it just to go and shoot out. So what do? Well, it just looks quite nice and bright and shiny, doesn't it? It's incredibly heavy. This is hematite, again, one of the really, really old, it's in a 7,000-year-old recipe for healing a sick man. So, you know, we know that it was being used a very long time ago. And it grounds, and it helps to make this protective shield that will bring the Kundalini up and then down again, and we're going to look at that. But that's one of my all-time sort of favourite grounding stones. And then we have this. I love this because it's free. You know, but it's not only free, it's extremely effective. This is flint. This is good old-fashioned flint. And this comes out of my garden, and my garden is on the edge of the Dorset Cursus. Oldest ritual way in England, longest ritual way in England. Guess what? It has a serpentine feel to it. And it's my local archaeologist describes it as the landscape of the dead and rebirth. And it ends with a bank where you can't walk the whole length now, but in the old days when you scrambled through puddles and lakes and up banks and down hills, and you'd done this really deep initiation, what you then did, you came up the bank and there was the setting sun, because aligned to midwinter sunset, not sunrise. But in front of you, you would have all this flint. And I go and harvest it because it's an inexhaustible supply, and it's got that energy to it. So this is my favourite grounding stone. Normally I would have brought you some, but the weather in Dorset was so foul yesterday. The rain was horizontal, it wasn't coming down straight, it was so windy. And so you haven't got any, but this is what we always use at the feet, and I'll show you that in a minute. This is Kundalini quartz. It's a natural form of citrine, comes from the Congo. It's a really oily, I mean, you can probably see when you look at it, it's not like the bright yellow citrine anyway is heat treated amethyst, it's not natural. But most natural citrine's quite pale, but this is really sort of greeny. And the first time anybody put a piece of this in my hand and said, "What do you think of this?" You know, they had to get me off the ceiling, you know, it was like, oh my goodness, this energy rush that came up. I'm quite used to it now, but you can have a feel of it later. It's very, again, put it on your base chakra, gently move it up, and it brings the energy up with it. It's amazing stuff. We've got a tiny bit here of triplite, and believe me, you don't even need a piece this big. A piece just like this tiny, the end is sufficient to move the energy. It's what we've been using in workshops. You put a tiny piece of triplite, and it's kind of the creative force embodied, and it just triggers everything in your body. But it's difficult to get hold of now because it comes from Pakistan, and there's not a lot of it around. But if you can get one that's got the lovely red and the matrix, it grounds things for you. It really helps. And then, invaluable, smoky quartz. really good for detoxing. If you do find that everything's coming at you, you know, that you've had one of these catharsis and stuff sort of coming out and, oh, you feel grotty, just sit with a smoky quartz and it'll just gently ease it for you. And then my latest toy. I just love this stuff. This is Celtic Golden Healer Quartz. It's off a mountain in Wales, which is the shape of a dragon. It has a great big golden dragon that comes to meet you when you go to the mountain. And we come back with piles of this stuff, and we've used a lot of it in workshops. And it does this really gentle Kundalini rise. So, you know, this doesn't have to be blasting you out of your body. It doesn't have to be sort of something that knocks you for six. It can be gentle, it can be controlled. And one of the ways that you prepare yourself is with an andalite. I was given some of this last year before, and I'd been asking for a quick way to clean the chakras, because I used to go to do a workshop, and by lunchtime we'd only just got the chakras cleaned and the energy bodies lined up, and you know, it was like, got to get to the end of the day. So I asked for something to clean the crystals and got the petal tone essences. I asked for something to do the chakras quickly, and this arrived in the post from the lovely John Van Rees in the States, who does exquisite crystals. And John said, what do you think of this? And it was like, oh, this is interesting. You know, I love getting parcels from John because they're always wonderful. And John said he had found that if you went down to your feet, up over your head and down to the back, it cleaned your chakras. But I found in the workshops we experimented with this, and we went from our feet up through the chakras, stopping if one felt a bit sticky, and the crystal would do the work. You didn't have to even know what it was, but I love that. Anything that'll do it for me without my head having to get in the way, brilliant. And then we went right down to the back, came back up again and over, and so it was like it did a clean, then it did a re-energize. Then we go side to side, because what we tend to forget, and I don't even know, I keep meaning to have a look and see whether I really did put it in the book, that chakras just don't come forward, they come out to the sides as well. And when you go side to side, you do that, and therefore your energy is pristine. It's given it a really good clean. And so that's the first thing that we do whenever we're preparing for a workshop. The next thing we do normally is to use some flint at the feet to ground everybody. Because if you're having all these experiences up here, higher consciousness, Kundalini, whatever it is, and you don't ground it, your body doesn't get the benefit, the earth doesn't get the benefit. So normally I would put a piece of this at your feet, but we're just going to beam it around. You're going to get the feeling of, you can either have a nice brown earthy piece at your feet, or you can have this much bluer, depends how your energy feels. Then you've got your crystal. A little piece of poppy jasper. Just below your navel, and you all know where it's not called your tummy button. Do you call it tummy button in the States? Belly button. In England, we use belly button as well, but I like this idea that it's a button that can be pressed, you know. So you just put your stone there. It's just the red version, which I found up there in the crystal. I bought a little one, but I thought, well, why not have a big one? Actually, I always say biggest isn't best, brightest and shiniest isn't most powerful. But for the purpose of showing you where to put it, that's where it goes, just below the belly button, the navel. And that is your dantian. It's a power centre. And when you stand, it's actually your centre of gravity. When you move around, you're moving around your dantian, and that is the place, if you've got excess energy of any kind, but especially Kundalini, this is the place to store it, just under the navel, just in that dantian, and you can draw on it at any time. But the dantian also, because it's the centre of gravity, we can make a root, a grounding root, that anchors us and helps us to be in incarnation and to bring these higher energies down gently, or to raise them up gently. And it's that word gently. This is what we want, a flow, not a blast. So, just for one moment, concentrate on that crystal, on that energy spot, and just feel that's your power centre. That's where your energies come from, return to, and it's where your centre of gravity is. And from there, you can grow roots out across to your hips, one to the right, one to the left, and just let the energy of the crystal grow the root for you. It's just expanding, moving across. It's almost like a cord, a channel of crystal energy. And it's going to go to your hips, and it's going to go down your legs, and it's going to your knees. Now, knee chakras aren't spoken about very much, but I can tell you from many years of experience with kneecaps falling off and scars on knees, they're actually very important for being grounded. When your knees aren't functioning, you don't actually walk on the earth, you walk about 3 feet above it, kind of mentally and spiritually. So just check out your knees. How are they? Are they feeling good? Are they actually functioning? Do they feel equal and balanced? And feel the roots from the crystal growing down through those knee chakras, activating them so that they're like plates. They're like little energy dishes that hold you, they cup you. And then down goes the root, on down through the calves, through the ankles, into the feet. Again, we get a right turn and we come from the bottom of the feet. The crystal energy comes out and it meets between your feet. And it meets about a foot below your feet. And that is the Earth Star chakra. This is the chakra that is your personal connection to the earth. From there, the root goes down. Now, for some people, it goes down a foot or so. For some people, it goes down a few miles. It goes down to the Gaia Gateway chakra, which is your connection to the spirit of the planet and to a much bigger energy. It goes down through there. Now, that Gaia Gateway is really important, and we'll come back to why it's important in a minute. But from there, your root can go right on down into the centre of the earth, right down through the mantle, and it can hook itself around a big hematite crystal that is in the middle of the earth. And scientists, there's a wonderful program that's doing the rounds about how they think there must be a big hematite crystal in the centre of the earth, otherwise we wouldn't have so much gravity. And I thought, finally, they've caught up. It's only taken them 7,000 years to reconnect to what people knew 7,000 years ago. Hematite grounds you, gives you a centre of gravity. So from there, you can actually bring energy up. If you need to be energised, you can bring earth energy up. But just bring your attention back up to that Gaia Gateway that we mentioned. And just make sure that you know where your Gaia Gateway is. And then bring the energy back up to your dantian, to your centre, to where your crystal is. Now from there, we're going to do another channel which goes up the spine, forward, back, up through the chakras that you're probably familiar with, and it will also go down to the base. You'll find the dantian, the roots actually extend through your sacral and your base chakras as well. So the whole of your belly is sort of now rooted and grounded. So we've got this channel coming up, and we're coming up about this far, 3 feet or so, far as you can reach above your head. And there is the stellar gateway chakra and the soul star chakra. Now the stellar gateway will connect to the earth star, the soul star will connect to the Gaia gateway, or the other way around. I've always said, oh, it's this way, and then somebody said the other day, mine works the other way. She gets a sort of figure of 8, so you have to figure out which of your chakras connect up. But when you've got the stellar gateway and the soul star, we've got connection to higher consciousness. When you've got that channel that comes up your spine, the Kundalini can come up your spine, can come up to here, but instead of shooting off in all directions, it can then actually fall all the way through your energy field in your body, back down to the bottom, and the whole cycle can start again. So you actually get this wonderful flow of energy. And when the Kundalini starts to rise, it will follow, because you've created with your mind and with the crystal, you've created that channel. The energy can flow that way, and that's how it gets into your cells. It's not just the physical cells, the energetic cells. The Kundalini can go right through. And that's where you're aiming for. A nice, gentle, but highly potent and very energizing flow. Okay, so how's that feeling? Does it feel like it's actually establishing that flow? You might find that you've got certain chakras that need work, need to unblock. When I wrote the Crystal Prescriptions book, I had to start with the chakras and how to cleanse each chakra, and what the chakra working positively would do, what it, when it was blocked, would do. Because I realised that unless you'd got that part of the information, any Kundalini rise was just going to sort of blast out. So when I wrote the book, it was structured, and when we do a workshop, it's structured. In a half-hour, 3/4 of an hour talk, I can only tell you that your chakras and your energy bodies need to be in harmony before you start to raise your Kundalini, however you do it. If you do Kundalini yoga, I told that, they do each chakra and then it's ready for the rise. So let's see how you're doing. Anybody having, can't see you around the corner, but I think you're all okay, are you? So do you have any questions? Anything that you... So circumstances under which you wouldn't do this work, I would say most definitely if there's any form of mental disturbance. Now that can range from literally having a psychiatric illness or depression, although it can be helpful with depression if it's a case of don't do it alone then. But the other case for not doing it is if you've got any strong thought forms or spirit attachment. This is why we want the energies and the chakras to be as pure and clean and organised, functioning properly, because you don't want to be wide open for something else coming in. And that's what I'm writing on at the moment, is about spirit release and protection and all the things that I've been looking at for years. And again, this same 7,000-year-old recipe is looking at how do you detach a spirit. They believed that the spirit was making the sick man sicker. So I think that is really the kind of key, how mentally balanced is somebody, and make sure your energies are clean and protected. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the question is Kundalini always present, and how do you interact with it? Do you pull it up? Yes, I would agree it's always present, but very often it's not activated. There is a life force which is separate from pure Kundalini energy. It's like the Kundalini is the higher resonance of the life force, the creative force. That's how I've come to explain it to myself, because I had to find I found there was a difference, but I had to find a way to differentiate them. And when we work in the workshops with the Kundalini, and the description of how to do it is in the book, we use it to bring from the base chakra up through these channels and then put them through the energy fields, so that the process is controlled, because so often people have inadvertently triggered a massive Kundalini rise that's been overwhelming, and that they don't know where to go with it, or they're not aware that that's actually what has been triggered. So, you know, the problem that I have is, in the West, we don't have the names and the distinctions between these very subtle divisions of the energy. And when it's all flowing and everything's sort of shifted up a notch, then yes, it all is the same. But while it's dormant, then there is a difference. Does that make? So is Kundalini only on our planet, or is it intergalactic, is the question. I have this wonderful picture in my head, which I've had ever since I was a child, and it very much fitted in with teaching that I was given, that the earth is one of the galactic chakras. So it's the whole microcosm, macrocosm. We have the chakras, the earth has her own chakras, the galaxy has its chakras, and so it goes on. And once you get a really good controlled Kundalini flow, and then you go up to the higher chakras, you can take the Kundalini energy up there and you can go out to the cosmos with it, or you can go down into the earth and do earth healing and work through the earth chakras with it. But there's a point where it all becomes one. At each stage you realise how much more expansive it is, how much more wide this concept can be. And I think that's something, certainly for me, and working with the new high vibration crystals has really opened up that going out and exploring what's out there. But then I realise actually it's in here as well. So it's like my inner world has got this vast cosmos with all this energy, and the outer cosmos has got the same energy currents. And again, I was really amused the other day when I saw this headline, "Space is not empty after all," and a big exclamation mark. And they said, scientists have found solar winds and particles, and we know they're there. I mean, common sense says something is conveying these things. There isn't just big, vast, empty gaps in between planets. And you can call that life force, you can call it Kundalini, you can call it spirit, whatever language works for you, but it's certainly there. Rather than the end with the exceptional human experiences. The start of the journey is literally what we've done. Grounding, getting that channel working. And then you start working with something like the poppy jasper or the Kundalini quartz, and you very slowly bring it up to each chakra, making sure that it's all comfortable. And you might take a week, you might take a month, you might take 2 years to actually get the energy up to each chakra, and then at the next session you bring it up a bit further. But you can breathe and hold it and really sort of get into a rhythm with bringing it up, breathing, holding, bring it up, breathing, holding. And I've done 6 or 7 workshops in the last year, and probably had 25 to 35 people on each, so I can't do the maths on that, but quite a good sample, many of whom had never done any of the work before. And by the end of a workshop, because we were clearing the blocks and because we were working in groups and people were holding the space for them, everybody could feel Kundalini coming up and going down and coming back and storing it in the dantian. So it doesn't have to be an incredibly long process. And you don't have to come from a place of knowing everything about it first. In fact, I quite often think the more you know, the more it gets in the way. It's certainly for me, I keep having to unlearn things I thought I'd learned and then starting again, because I go, yes, and I get a different perspective on it. So being a beginner, being new to it, you haven't got to unlearn anything. Great place to be. So if you've had your head blasted off, what crystals help? Well, these two are my sort of go-to. So that's serpentine in any form. This one happens to be a red one, an andalite, and then the invaluable flint at the feet. So I would put, if somebody came to me in that state, I would put flint at their feet, get them to do that grounding cord exercise that we've just done, and then I would put an andalite back there, and then very gently sort of work with a serpentine like this until I found the point where it was shooting and disconnected and needed some more work. And you can just leave somebody lying with the crystals in place 15-20 minutes, and you can actually, if you can see energetically, brilliant. But actually, even if you don't have a psychic eye, you can sense the energy settling and coming back into the body. And then, and I say to people all the time, come back to your feet, come back to that grounding cord. And once that connection to the earth is established, then you don't blast out. And once those chakras then send it back like this, you are not going to lose your head again. It's not going to blast off and blast open again. The experience. And it is, yes, a very individual experience. But what we found is that actually working with a group of like-minded people, and I would stress that, if you've got somebody who, I'm unfortunate that I don't, but if you've got somebody who's really cynical and putting very negative thoughts in, wouldn't help the process at all. But having a group energy where really everybody's rooting for it to happen for people, it makes it so much easier. And people who would be very inhibited, maybe, it's fascinating watching we usually work in threes, in little groups in threes. And the one who holds back and kind of, you go first, you go, who's obviously a bit more hesitant about it, they always get the most beautiful experience when the other two have worked, because the other two hold the space and use the crystals for them if they need it. And by that time, the energy in the room has built up to such an extent that I think it would be very difficult not to have a Kundalini experience. But it's at the level that somebody needs. And we had one which was, it took a very long time, and we always give as much time as is needed. And you could see it moving through her in waves, and she was actually speaking in ancient Egyptian. And I was thinking, if only I could have recorded this, and she said afterwards to me, you didn't record it, did you? Because she does teach this stuff. But she said she was aware of this block. And by the time it came to the end of her session, everybody else was sitting round and everybody was holding the space and not willing it in the sense of forcing it, but just thinking, okay, come on, let's do it, let's do it. And the energy had built up to such an extent. It really was extraordinary. And, you know, you just couldn't not have completed the process with everybody of like mind, so focused on it coming through and getting there. And she was amazing afterwards. Yeah. So the question is Kundalini and past life experiences. And I have to say that I've been doing regressions with people for 45 years. So I've regressed a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people have very strong Kundalini experiences once we'd cleared past life blocks. So the two definitely sort of go together. But, you know, I think certain incarnations in specific places would have focused on Kundalini. Egypt, certainly one of them. You only have to look at the caduceus and all the snakes and the pharaoh and his headdress of the snake to know they were working with Kundalini, and the same in the Far East. So a lot of us have had experiences of, I think, both beneficially using it and sometimes using it for detriment, because it could be used as a power against someone, or someone could be blasted out of their body by the experience and still have a bit of their body missing. So you actually need to do a bit of soul retrieval and going back. But that's where I just find the crystals so helpful, because my head doesn't have to go, oh, somebody's left a bit of themselves in that life back there. If I'm working with something like this, it will bring that back, it will purify it, will reintegrate it. And we might know that it's happened, and we might not at the end of the day, but the effect will be visible. And I think that's what's so, for me, all the work I do with crystals, it's just so helpful. It's taking my head out of it and having to intellectually understand the process doesn't really help for the process to actually happen.